What am I seeing so far this year as I start looking at fields? I'm glad you asked. So on this last Friday, I started to get my first emergence call saying, hey, we got some fields that don't look so hot. Can you come out and look at them? Sunday, started looking at corn. Here's the trends that I'm finding. So far, what we're looking at and evaluating are our first and second planting windows in East Central and Northeast Iowa. Our first planting window was middle of April, right? The super early guys down south at Interstate 80, right? Looking at April 10th. And then we basically got to plant until the night of the 16th. So it was warm, soil conditions were good, soil temperatures were good. We got a warm rain the night of the 16th. The 17th was like okay temperatures, and then we got 4 to 5 days, highs in the 50s, lows in the 30s. That was our first planting window. As I go out and evaluate those stands are pretty good. If I'm having issues in those stands, we're finding chilling injury. So in some cases, it's leafing out under the ground. Maybe it started germination and stopped. Maybe we're getting some twisting of the mesocotyls. They never made it to the top. So where I am finding issues, overall that planting window is pretty decent. If we're having issues, it's a hybrid or a seed lot number that just couldn't handle being that cold and wet for that long. Okay, our second planting window, I really thought it was going to be our best planting window. So looking at April 20s, April 21st to about the 26th, depending on when you got rain. That stuff went into the ground really well. It got a rain on it, and then it didn't stop raining. Most of the issues are coming from the Cedar Rapids up to Waterloo, over to Independence, kind of that general area, because you guys probably got most of the heaviest rain, and it's causing a lot of issues. So we're getting quite a bit of crusting. We're getting quite a bit of silting in. So we got a lot of soil movement. We got a lot of residue moved on top of that row. It's making some stuff that was planted at 2 inches be planted at 3 inches. There's some of this corn that popped through, broke open its coleoptile, put that leaf out, and then it got covered up. So we're getting some more of that leafing out underground that way as well. So the other issue that we're having is that we did not plant this stuff with a scuba suit. And when you have saturated soils, but they're warm, that seed cannot survive quite as long because it's trying to metabolize, it's trying to grow without any oxygen, and that will cause it to die. So we are losing some stand where that stuff germinated, but it was too saturated to grow, so it's dying for that reason as well. So if you did make it to the surface, there are other things that could happen to it. So I'm in a field here and I've got a hybrid split. This is a field that had gotten some of those big heavy rains, so there is some silting in, there is some crusting, but overall we're working off of about 30,000 plant count in both of these hybrids. So after you look at the number of plants that you have out there, the next thing you want to do is look at the individual plants and kind of assess their health as well. So what I noticed in this hybrid is just overall some off-color plants, but then especially like these little guys, right? So it's not just that they're late emergers, it's that like the leaves are really skinny, you know, compared to one of these. It's like it's just miniaturized. It's still developed the same as all these, but they're a lot smaller. The color is also very off. There's even some of these plants that are a little bit bigger, right? But we still got like this really weird kind of yellow modeling of these lower leaves. You can tell he's like got to a certain size and then stopped. These guys look good. In these scenarios, I like to pick out a good plant and a bad plant and really tease out what are the differences. So this one actually doesn't look that bad, but we've got that discoloration of the leaves. And then we've got this nice happy guy here. We've got a V1 plant, good color on him, good size. We've got our crown here. Our nodal roots are starting to grow and develop. We have a very nice, white, healthy mesocotyl, a nice long radical root, and we also have our seminal roots coming out here as well. Now, when we compare to this guy over here, so we've got our leaves. He also is V1, just a little bit different color. We come down the plant here. We do have some small nodal roots starting to develop. We still have a nice white mesocotyl here. But what I notice on this guy here is look at the difference in radicle difference. So here's the good plant. We've got a full, nice radicle. He's putting some fibrous, roots out there, or seminal roots. On this plant, look at how short that radicle is. It's like it stopped growing. Same thing, we've got one poorly developed seminal root. So mesocotyle still looks good, but the radicle doesn't. Let's go see if we can find some plants that look a little bit worse than him, maybe are a little bit smaller. So again, you can see on this plant just kind of a poorly developed radicle, not very long, not a whole lot of those fibers coming off of it, but you can start to see on that crown where those nodal roots should be popping out. It's a little bit discolored. When I push on it, I can start to feel a little bit of soft, maybe a little bit of like rotting tissue as those nodal roots are trying to develop. So as this continues to progress, you'll eventually get to the point where those nodal roots aren't developing and you're going to start seeing a discoloration of that mesocotyle. So a good happy plant should have all of these structures. Those nodal roots should be starting, they should be growing. Nice white mesocotyle. This guy is just about ready. I mean, he's pretty well dead. He's just waiting to dry up and finally give up the ghost. So seedling diseases and damping off is not at all surprising when we have these kinds of weather conditions. Now, there are some genetics, some hybrids that are more or less prone to be having it. You have differences in seed treatments. You also have differences in insecticide treatments, which can influence it. Because if you have a lower insecticide rate, then you're going to get a little bit more nibbling of some of those secondary pests like white grubs or wireworms. That's allowing that pathogen to get into the plant. So there's a lot of different things that can contribute to this, but the number one contributing factor by far is Mother Nature. So in a situation like this where we already have a slightly decreased stand, what I would then do is, as I'm taking my stand counts, I would dig up all of the plants in that 17 foot 5 inches and then count how many of them are diseased and how many of them I think will survive or not. Now, that's a pretty tricky thing. So you're going to want to find out what's your potential final stand and see if that constitutes a replant decision. Now, these plants are V1 and they will rely, right? They're relying on that mesocotyle to be able to get nutrients and water from the radical root and the seminal roots. Now, when you get things like Pythium, it's killing off those seed roots. It's also killing off the route that everything takes to get to the plant. This plant at this stage cannot survive if it doesn't have a good, healthy mesocotyle, radical root, or seminal roots. These plants will need to be able to get to about V3, V4 in order to get those nodal roots grown out and developing and working. If the radical root and the seminal roots and the mesocotyle goes before those nodal roots can take over, that plant's not going to make it.